Welcome to my new series on obbies and adding new obstacles to your obbies. And this first video we're going to cover the basics, where we're going to look at a start point, a goal, checkpoints, and how to return your player back to these checkpoints if they should fall off your obby. So stick around and we will get started. Welcome to Roblox Snippets. We're going to start by building a very simple obby with some basic features, and then each time I add to this series I'll show you how to create some more interesting things to add into your obby to make it more difficult for your players and more interesting. So let's get started, and open up a blank project, and we'll come up to the workspace and we'll create a couple of parts. So the first one, just up the top on home and come across the part, add one in, and let's change its name to be start. Alright, so it will be the start part. Now you can make this whatever colour you like. I might make mine red so that it stands out, and then down below you could, actually I might make the colour just something other than red. Let's say I'll just do a blue colour here. Alright, and change it to be something that you like, and keep in mind you can play around with all of these things a bit later. However, let's just pick limestone for the time being. Then scrolling down through our properties, we're going to change its size. So let's make it say 6 by 1 by 6, so it's a large sort of tile. And scrolling down through the properties further, we want it to be can collide on, so that players are on top of it, and you can leave these others and anchored as well. So we have this start part here now where our players will end up landing on to begin our obby. Now we can right click on this and duplicate it, and using our move tool just slide it across to the right and change its name to be the goal part. And so that it's different, we'll come up and simply change its colour. We might make it a greenish sort of colour, I guess, and that should be good. Alright, so we have our start part, which will move over here, and we have our goal part, which we can move over here. Now the obstacles that we're going to create in this first one are simply platforms. So the player has to jump from our start point onto each platform without falling and get across to the goal. It's very simple, I know. However, the focus will be largely on the coding that goes into this to make things happen so that your player has a good experience. So I'll just move my spawn point over here, and let's create another part in our workspace now. And this one, we're going to make it sort of a long sort of part. So I'll just hit Command there to spin it around, and let's make it I'll make mine a wooden type sort of colour, so brown, and I'll make it wood planks, and we can scroll down then through the list and we'll come to its size. So let's make it say we'll leave it 4 by 1 by say 6. Since we're around this way, let's go 6 by 1 by 4. Alright, maybe even longer than that if you like, so that we have quite a wide by 1 by 6. Oops. Make it 4. Alright, so once again, this is something that you can play around with to make it more difficult or easier for your players. But for now, let's just stick with this one, and we're going to call this one Path. So this is a standard piece in our obby that players can land on, and we'll use that all around our obby when we're not doing anything special with the thing that they're standing on. Now, so that we have, we're going to make it fairly easy for the player initially. So with your path selected here, if you come up to Model and just make sure the Rotate and Move tools are turned off, and slide the part so that it just touches our start part. And we're going to set this to be 4 studs apart. So if you click on the box and then click in here and change this to be 4, as I've already done. Now when we move our path, it will come across exactly 4 studs. And we're going to make a few of these across towards our goal. So what you can do is right click and onto duplicate, alright, and then drag that one across 4 and then another 4. And you can also use Command or Control D to duplicate sometimes. In my case it's not going to work for me, and I'll duplicate this one and drag it across. Alright, so just repeat that a few times. And we might go a couple more, so I'll move my goal part even further away. I'd like every second one to end up being a checkpoint when we get to that point. So we'll have 1, 2 checkpoint, 1, 2 checkpoint, and then we'll probably have another couple after that. So let's move this over and we'll duplicate this one. And once again. Right, so now we have our start, our goal, and our obstacles, which are these planks in here. Now, if I didn't set everything correctly, you can click on the first one of the path and then hold down Shift and click on the last one, so you've selected them all. And let's just come down and check that we have everything set as we need. So we've got the color, etc., but down here we want to have anchored turned on. So make sure that that is turned on and can collide is, so that the players can land on this. Now, to keep our workspace organized, if I get rid of properties, you'll see we quickly start to build up a whole bunch of things in our workspace, and that can get quite confusing. So come up to our workspace at the top and click on plus. We're going to create a folder, all right, and change the name of this folder to be paths, or we'll say all path. And then just like you did before, click on the first path and then the last one, and we're going to drag it inside of the all path folder. And that way it keeps our workspace nice and tidy, and it's easy to find various things when we want to work on them. Okay, so the next thing that we want to look at is to develop a couple of these into checkpoints. So if the player jumps from here to here and they make it to this third one, then we're going to make that a checkpoint where we will save their progress, and if they fall off, they'll be returned back to this checkpoint before continuing. So let's work out which ones they are. We'll say we'll go two jumps, and then the third one, this one here, let's change its name to be CP for now. Okay, so short for checkpoint. And then we'll come down and we'll say another 2, so 1, 2, and then the third one, let's call it CP as well. And then we'll have 2 more, and then we will end up getting to the goal part at the end. And just to make sure that we can actually get to the goal part, let's just move part, and we'll just move it across 4. So this is quite easy at the moment. Now our checkpoints don't stand out very well, so let's make a change to the ones we've changed to CP. So you can click on both of them, so the first one, and then Control or Command and click on the other CP one, so we can change its properties at the same time. And then down in its properties, let's just leave everything as it is except for the material. I'd like you to change that to be neon. So in the list, find neon, and it will make it change color like this. Right, so if you don't like that, by all means change it to another color or effect. But for now, that should serve our purposes to stand out as checkpoints. Now we don't want our checkpoints to be inside of our path folder, so let's make another folder up here in the workspace. Click on the plus in a folder, and then we'll change the name of this to be all checkpoints. And we're going to drag these into that folder. So checkpoint and checkpoint. Now we're going to create one other checkpoint, and it's going to be over here, or we actually might make the start part a checkpoint as well. So if you take your start part and drag it into the checkpoints, and we're going to change it to be CP as well. So it's no longer started, it will be checkpoint. And now we'll get these in order. So the first one obviously is the start point we just moved in here. So at the end of this, put a CP with a 1 at the end of it, like that. And then the next one, make sure that it's the next one in the as you move to the goal. We'll change that to 2. And the final checkpoint up here will be checkpoint 3. Now the goal won't get a checkpoint because that's the goal, and when we get to the end of the goal we want to reward the player and move them on to the next level. Alright, so if you have all of these things in place here, we've got the basics for our obby, and the next thing we want to do is lift it all up off the ground. So if you close up your folders, click on the All Path folder, which will select them all, Command or Control to get the checkpoints, and the only other one we want to grab at the moment, Command or Control with the goal part, and then we're going to move it up in the air, well, as high as you like. Now, when the players fall off of our obby, they're going to fall just onto the ground, which is not very ominous. So let's click on our base plate, and I'm going to make mine a bright red, and I'm going to change it to be cracked lava. Alright, so to make it dangerous, sort of dangerous looking, pretty scary, isn't it? And that is it. So when the players fall off, you could have them die. We're not going to have them die in here. We're going to move them to wherever they need to be in our obby so that they can continue. So when you get up to that point, make sure you give your project a save, and we are ready to move on to the next part. Now that we have all of the pieces in our game, a very simple game that we've got here, we're going to create some variables that to keep track of some things in the game. Now, the first thing that we're going to keep track of will be the checkpoints. So we need a way to be able to tell which checkpoint the player has reached. And the other thing that we might do is when the player reaches the goal at the end, we should give them a little reward. So in this case, we're going to create a level. So they'll start at level 1 and jump across here, and if they make it to this goal, then we will increase their level to level 2, which would mean we could move them off to another obby that's a bit more difficult, etc. So to do that, we'll come down to Server Script Service and click on the plus, and we're going to add a script in here, and we'll change its name to be main script. And I'll just make this a bit bigger so we can see. Get rid of our hello world, and we're good to go. So each time a player joins the game, we're going to create a leader stats folder and add these variables in. So let's start by adding game.players.playerAdded, and we will connect a function where we'll pass in whoever the player is that's joining the game. We're not going to worry about characters here just at the moment because, as I said, we're not going to let the player die, and characters are more important when the player dies. So in this case, we can just make do with the player being added. Right, we'll create a leader stats folder. So if you've never done that, we create a local variable called leader stats. And you could call this whatever you like here, but we'll just use the same word. And it's going to be a folder, so instance.new, inverted commas, and a folder. And if you just move over and add a comma, we're going to parent this to the player. So when you do it like this, create an instance and parent it this way, it's the same as writing down here leaderstats.parent equals and then putting player here. So it's just a shortened version. The only other thing we need to do here is leader stats, give it a name, and it needs to be leader stats. So this part here is important. It's special for Roblox in order to create the leader stats. So if you call this over here banana, alright, that's okay, but this part has to be leader stats all lowercase, just as shown here. So now we'll create our two variables. The first one will be to get the player checkpoints. So local, and we'll say player stage here, and it'll be instance.new, and in this case it'll be a number value, and we'll parent this to the leader stats folder, and we'll give it a name, so stage.name, and we'll call it checkpoint. So this will display on the screen which checkpoint the player has currently reached, or the last one that they're on, and we'll set that value equal to 1. Right, so they're going to start on the very first checkpoint that they start on will be 1, and then we will move up to 2, 3, etc. Now we'll add the other variable in as well for the player level. So local player level will be equal to instance.new, and it also will be a number value. We'll parent that to the leader stats folder, and player level name, name, and we can call this well, we'll just call it level, and the player level dot value, and we'll also set that one to 1 as well. Alright, so it should look something like this, and once, just so you can see it all there, once you have this in here, give your project a save and we'll run it. Alright, so I'm in the game, and I'll just bring up my output window down the bottom. As you can see, there's no errors, and we have our leader stats. So my character name up here is checkpoint 1 level 1. Now the thing is that we're over here on their spawn point, yet the game is over here. Alright, so the next thing that we'll look at is moving the player from here, and where this spawn point is, let's pretend that this is a lobby, for instance. And when they're in the lobby, they might be moved to whichever level they're on to start the obby when they enter the game. So we'll write some code that will move our player when they join the game to the start of the current level so that they can actually play. All right, so that will be the next thing we'll do. So we'll just stop that there and we can move on. Okay, so now that we have some variables in our main script to work with, checkpoints and levels, we'll make use of this checkpoint here initially to move the player if they fall off of our obby onto the base plate. So over in your Explorer window, find the base plate and click on the plus, and we're going to add a script in here, and we'll change the name of that to be base plate script, and get rid of our hello world in here. So we're going to write a function that when the base plate is touched, it's going to run some code and work out where the player should be. So we'll create a variable called base to represent the base plate, and that will be script.parent. Right, so if you're new to coding, just remember the script is here and its parent is what's above, so that's what this is. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to get all of the checkpoints that we created over here. So if I put it into this view and we highlight them, so 3, 2 and 1, you'll see we have 1 as the start and then 2 and 3 here. So whenever the player hits the base plate, we want to work out, well, which one of these, which checkpoint matches up with this part. So in our script, we can get all of the checkpoints. So we can say all checkpoints equals the workspace dot all checkpoints, and then we use get children. And that will gather all of these parts here in a table and return it into this variable over here, which we're going to loop through very shortly. So now down below this, we'll create a touched event. So base dot touched. All right, so this is an event. So when something touches the base plate, something's happening. We want to connect a function to this, and we're going to pass in a parameter called hit. Now this hit part represents a part of the character that is touching the base plate, which could be their foot or leg or whatever, and but it will be part of the player that we want to work with. And we'll put in here, we'll get the character for a start. So now the character, we're going to assume that whatever's touching the base plate is connected to a character. So we put in here hit.parent. So if it's the character's foot, then the parent of foot will be the character themselves. Okay. Then we'll also get the player. So PLR for short will equal game.players, and we'll put a colon and get player from character, and simply type in character here. Now we could have just used player here, but we want to make use of the humanoid root part inside of the character. That's why I've included this variable here, if you're a little bit advanced. So once we have this information, we know we want to check if we actually have a player. So if player, then, so this should be true, which means we've actually found a player from our character. Then we can run the code inside. And the first thing we want to do is get a hold of our leader stats folder that we created up here for the player. So we do that by saying local, and I'll call it p stats, so player stats equals player, and add a colon and wait for child. So whenever you deal with folders, you should use wait for child if you, just to make sure that it's loaded, and it reduces the chances of getting errors. And our leader stats, that's the name of the folder. So that will get us our folder of variables that we want to use. Next, we're interested in the checkpoint. So player checkpoint, and we can type here p stats and dot checkpoint. So make sure that if you write it like this, dot checkpoint, it matches exactly what you put here. Even if you copy and paste this over here, because if this is a small c, then that's not going to work. Now, later on when your game gets a bit bigger, you may find that this will cause an error because that variable inside of this folder may not have been created yet. If that is the case, you could add wait for child in here instead. All right. So for now, though, we'll leave it as dot checkpoint. Now we're going to loop through all of the checkpoints and then compare it to which checkpoint value the player currently has. And remember, we started with checkpoint value of 1. Okay. So to write that for loop, we can say for I, each checkpoint in pairs, and then we're going to use this table up the top here, all checkpoints do, and hit enter. So it should look like this. Then inside of this, we'll do a check. So we're going to say if player checkpoint dot value is equal to I, then we're going to do something. Now, as this scrolls through these checkpoints over here, it should match up with what's in this folder. Now we're going to do a check here because sometimes it doesn't always record these things in order. So to do that, we can say print I, and we're going to print each checkpoint. All right, and we'll open up our output window, and I'll just give the game a quick run. Right, I'm loading the game, so now if I run onto the base plate, you'll see we had 1 come up, but we had it come up with CP3, which is not what we want. We want it to match up, so I needs to match up with CP1. So if that happens to you, stop, and we're going to come back, and what I'd like you to do is, in the checkpoints folder, click on the first one and then hold down Shift to get all 3 checkpoints. Then drag them up into the workspace, and then we're going to drag each one in order back into the folder. So CP1, the first one, then CP2, then CP3, and they should be in order. Now we can file and save that and play again, and let's just see if we can get a different result when we play this time. And now you should see that the 1 for the I matches up with CP1 over here. Now there is a way we could fix that in code. However, since we're only working with a few parts, then that's the quickest and easiest way to do that. So back into our baseplate script, now we know we're working with the right parts that match up with I here. We can comment out that line. You can leave it in there to do checks later if you wish. But what it basically means is when their value over here in the main script, when it hits this one, we're going to make use of CP1, 2 or 3 to move the player to that part. And we do that by saying character.humanoid root part dot position equals, now it'll be whichever Sorry, I've got helper text on there, I don't need it. If this is 1, then this will be CP1. If this is 2, this will be CP2. So for that reason, we can say each checkpoint, so whatever the current one is, position, and then at the end we're going to add, and I'll get rid of this for the moment, we're going to add on a few studs so that the player is spawned or moved above the part and just sort of drops onto it. So we'll put in here vector3.new 0, comma, and I don't know, let's say 5, comma 0. So that should be about 5 studs above the part, and that's where the player should just sort of drop onto the part. Right, so with that, if you have a quick look at all of the code there, we should be able to test this, and when we run the game, you should expect that to see that the player gets moved from our spawn point, which is just back here a bit, up onto this part up here. Alright, so let's click on File and Save, and we'll open up our output window. We'll just clear it and play. Alright, so I'm on the spawn point. Remember, we need to run onto the base plate for this to work. And there we go, I have been moved up onto our starting location. Now, he was facing the wrong way, which you may be able to change if you were to use C-frames, which we'll sort of talk about later, about fine-tuning things. But for now, that is working the way that we want it to. So we'll come up to Explorer and Properties, and I'll just have a look at our start point and see which way it's facing. So currently we're facing forward, and if I bring up the orientation indicator, it's facing off this way. So if I hit Command or Control R a couple of times, that may fix the problem, but if not, then we can fix it up in the details a little bit later. Alright, but for now, that is working just as we need it to, and we're ready to actually start making things happen in our Obby, so we'll do that in the next section. Alright, we've dealt with the base plate and moving our player up to the beginning, or whichever checkpoint that script will work for when it has changed. But now we need to deal with the actual checkpoints in our game. Now, in an actual Obby, you may have lots of checkpoints. You might have like 20 checkpoints. And ideally, if you have something that does exactly the same job in parts, you want to use what's called a tagged script. And that is what we're going to do in here. So to create this, come over to Server Script Service, and we'll add a new script, and we're going to call this one our tagged checkpoints script. Bit of a long name, but it's very descriptive, and that's always good when you are trying to keep track of things. Get rid of our hello world. Now, if you've never used tagged parts before, basically what it lets you do is, like I said, if you had 20 checkpoints, instead of having 20 scripts in your game running and taking up resources, we can effectively do the same thing with one script, but apply the code to all of the tagged parts that we put into it. Alright, so the first thing we'll do is, in our tagged checkpoint script, is we're going to make use of a thing called the collection service. So local CS, short for collection service, equals game, and then get service, a set of inverted commas, and collection service. Next, we're going to collect a bunch of tagged parts, which we haven't tagged yet, but we will in a moment. And we're going to say tagged parts will equal the collection service, and then a colon, get tagged. And we'll put a set of inverted commas in here. So now, what it's waiting for in here now is what tag are we, or which parts have the tag that we're going to type in here. So let's create a tag for our checkpoint. So over in Explorer, open your checkpoints folder like this, and for this to work correctly, make sure you go into Workspace View. Alright, so you've got this. Then come up to Plugins, and we are looking for the Tag window. So if that doesn't appear for you, then come over to Manage Plugins and click on that. And if it's not in here, click on the plus and then add it in. It is included in Studio, so you should find it up the top here under Plugins. Once you have it, left click on it and it will open this window in here. Now, we're going to create a new tag. So next to this little pencil looking item, click in the box so it's flashing, and then type in checkpoints. Now once again, this is case sensitive, so if you do it all in lowercase, then you'll need to use this over in your script. I've made it with a capital C here. Hit enter and you should get the tag here with a box for us to check and a little light bulb over here. Next, we want to come over into the Explorer window, click on the first checkpoint, then hold down Shift and click on the last one so they're all highlighted. And when you've done that, click in the box next to checkpoint, and when you see a blue check like this appear, you're ready to go. Now we could close this window, but to make sure we get this right, now click on the tagged checkpoint script, and we're going to type this in here. So the helper text got in the way, but right, checkpoint. Now see, I typed that wrong. It should be checkpoints. So make sure you get it just right, even if you need to copy and paste it and put it in there. Once it's in, you can close the tag window and we are ready to go. Now, using this is just like writing a normal script, only we loop through all of the parts we want to apply the code to. So we write for and then a space and underscore. Now the underscore means for as many that there are inside of this actual table, so it doesn't matter. We're not making use of the iterator over here, so we don't need it. TP will be short for tagged part, and when it loops through, it will represent one of these parts here, right? And we say in pairs, tagged parts, and move outside do. And that's the basics of a tagged part script. Now we just write our script inside here as we would normally, just like we did for the base plate, and it's very similar, but don't copy and paste because there are a few differences. All right, so we're going to create for each part a local dB or dbounce value. So dB, basically we use this to control our script and how often it runs or when it runs. So add this in and that will be applied to each part. So they'll each get their own. And then just below this, now we'll write a touched event for the TP part, which is these. All right, so TP dot touched. Now you'll notice you won't get helper text because this actually doesn't exist yet until the game runs. So just be careful when you're typing it and get everything correct. So connect, a set of brackets, and then function. And once again, we're going to say hit. So it should look like this. Now the next 3 lines are the same from the base plate script. So if you go back to your base plate script or open it up, so double click on it, you can grab the player part here where we're getting the player from the character and come back over here and paste it in. Now in this case we're not making use of the character variable, but remember character over here was hit.parent. So instead of having this variable, what we can do is simply replace that with hit.parent and that will do the same thing. Just below this, we want to grab the p-stats and the checkpoint here. So let's grab both of those, copy and paste this. You can feel free to type it in if you wish. And everything should look like that. Now below here, we're going to loop through our all checkpoints folder again. So we'll need to get that once again. We can steal that from our base plate as well. So come in here and copy that line and add it in up the top here, just below our tagged parts. And we're going to scroll through, loop through this table, but in a slightly different way. So for I equals 1, that's going to be our start iterator. And then put hashtag all checkpoints. So what this does, remember this is a table of these checkpoints. The hashtag will count. So it's going to count in the loop 1 up to 3 in our case. And then we can say do and hit enter. Now we'll create a conditional statement in here to check if I plus this CP added to it is equal to whatever the value is in our checkpoint. All right, so just follow along. If and add a set of inverted commas, CP, so this is the first part of this, and then we're going to join to it with 2 dots I, so it'll be CP1, CP2, CP3 while this loops. If that is equal to TP.name, so remember, when we're looping through here, TP is represented by this up here. So if they match up, then that means that the player should be on checkpoint 1, 2, or 3. So if it matches that name and player checkpoint dot value is less than or equal to 1, sorry, not 1, I, then. Now we do this part because we only want this code to run, because otherwise if players were to run up to, say, checkpoint 2 here, right, and then they stopped and they decided to go backwards, if we didn't put this in, when they landed on here, it would save them as checkpoint 1 again, and that's what this part here will stop. It'll only save the highest value so that players can't go backwards. And all we need to put in here now is to change player checkpoint dot value equal to I. And that will only save the highest value that they are up to. All right, so I know some of that can be a bit confusing, however, we can run it, and if you want to check this while we're running, you can add a print statement, put in here CP, just like we did up above, dot I, and then a comma, and then the player checkpoint dot value. And this will tell us whether the checkpoint that we've saved matches up with the part they should be on. Now that we have that, let's bring up our output window and save, and let's run the game. Alright, so now we're in the game. Let's run into the base plate, and down the bottom here you should see CP1, which is our start checkpoint 1, and it's also changed up here. So checkpoint 1, well, it hasn't changed actually because that's what we set it at. So now let's play our obby a little bit by jumping. And when I land on this one, you'll see up here in the leader stats, checkpoint 2, right, it's changed up here, matches down the bottom. Let's test by going backwards. Alright, see how this has stayed at 2? So even though the player has gone backwards, they still save the correct checkpoint. Now to see if our base plate works properly, when we run off and fall onto it, we should go back to this checkpoint. And there we go. Alright, so we're on checkpoint 2. So now let's jump forward again. And we are now on checkpoint 3. And if I run off again, I come back to checkpoint 3. Right, and I can go through to the end. And the last thing that we're going to cover today is to reward the player by increasing their level. And, well, if we had another level, we could move them to it. But for now, the reward will be this one will change to 2. Very exciting. Okay, so we'll do that in the next section. Alright, the last thing that we need to do in our little obby example here for our basics is we need to add a script to our goal part. So over in our Explorer, come down and find the goal part, and we're going to add a script, and we'll call this our goal script. Whoops, misspelled script there. And get rid of our hello world. Right, so this is going to be a touched function, similar to what we've written before. When the player lands on the goal at the end, we're going to change this level here. We're going to increase this by 1. Now, there is a bit of a problem with how, since we've only got one level here, in that when they reach here, they're going to land on it, and then if we reset the script, now remember there might be more players, so you need to reset the script. You can't just delete it because it won't work for the next player. So we need to deal with the fact that, well, if they stay on there and keep running around, they're going to keep increasing their level rather than wait until they start the next one. So we will deal with that in here. So come to the goal script, and we'll create a variable for the goal, which will be script.parent. And we'll create its own debounce value, so db equals true. And then we'll create our touched event, so goal.touched, and we want to connect a function. You should be getting good at this now, remembering how to do this. Remember, we pass in the hit parameter and we hit enter, so it looks like this. Now in this case we only need to get the player, so you can copy and paste this if you want, but I'll just type this out this time. So we'll get the player by saying player equals game.players and a colon get player from character and add in hit.parent. Now we're going to make a conditional statement here, and we're going to need to create something different in a moment, but for now we'll just say if player and db, then we're going to run this code. So if it is a player and db is true, so these two things are both true, then the first thing we're going to do is set db equal to false, and then towards the end of the script we'll add a task.wait of say 1 second and allow the code to run again. Now as I said before, you don't want it to run for the same player over and over again, and for that reason we're going to actually create a thing called an attribute for each player. And to do that, come back to our main script. So if you don't have it open, remember it's down in server script service, and just double click on it to open it. And up the top here, right above where we've created the leader stats, right, so just click above leader stats and drop down a couple of lines. We're going to add in player and then a colon and then set attribute with a set of inverted commas, and we're going to call this level complete. Move outside of the inverted commas and add a comma and put in here false. So this means for each player, and I'll show you where you can see this when we run the game, this will set as false, meaning they've just started the level, and we'll only change it to true when they have finished or land on our goal part. So once you have this added into your main script, come back into the goal script now, and we're going to make use of that inside of this conditional statement here. So right after the DB, add a space and say and not. So when we put not in front of something, we're actually looking for false. So we'll say player, and this time instead of set attribute, we type get attribute, and the same thing that you typed in before, so level complete. And that's it. It will get the value. So we're looking for player to be true, DB to be true, and not this attribute, level complete, should be false, which means this is the first time they've landed on this goal part here at the end of the level. Now if they have done that, we want to immediately set this to true so that this part cannot run again. So right below where we change DB, we'll now say player and put set attribute, so not get, we're going to change its value, level complete, and move over and a comma, and we're going to set this to true this time. This, by doing it this way, we're going to ensure that this code only runs once for each player that lands on the goal part. Alright, so hopefully that makes sense to you. And then once we've done that, we can now go ahead and make some changes to our variables. So local p stats will equal player, and remember wait for child, and it will be leader stats, and then we want to get the player level, which will be p stats dot level, and we're also going to reset their checkpoint as well, so that they move to the beginning of the next level, but their checkpoint has been reset back to 1. So local player checkpoint will equal p stats dot checkpoint, and all we need to do now, let's move up a little bit, is to say player level dot value will plus equal 1. So that's a shortened way of saying player level value equals player level value plus 1. Alright, much easier to write and say it like that. Then drop down, and in the case of the checkpoints dot value, we just want to set it back to 1, which will always be the starting value, alright, at the end. Now we do just need to, if I get rid of this, move this task.wait, because at the moment it'll only run once, but it won't run for anybody else. So to do that, just highlight these two lines and Command or Control X to cut it. And at the end here, we want to drop down just here and paste it in. So it should look like that. Right, so this task, etc., should line up with this if outside of this end here. Right, so if yours looks like that, we're now ready to give this a try and test it out. So make sure that your output window is open down here so we can see if we get any errors. And we'll click on File and Save, and let's play. Alright, I'm in the game. You can see my checkpoint is 1, level is 1. So let's run on here, and I've moved on to the start point. Still on 1, all good. Now if I move across, oh, I only just made that. I'm not very good at this, am I? Alright, so checkpoint level 2, just to check. Yep, get moved back there. Jump onto this one. Alright, checkpoint level 3. If I fall off, I go back here. And now for the last test, you'll see that level gets changed to 2. My checkpoint gets reset to 1. Therefore, if I run off here, I go back to the beginning. Okay? And we should be good to go again, although it will cause problems if I go through to the end. I think in that it won't increase. And the reason for that is that we did not reset. If I stop this here, we didn't reset the level complete back to true again when they started again, which you could do, once this level had been completed. So we will deal with that more though in future videos. This was the basic setup for an obby, and in future obbies we're going to do much more exciting things, but it's very good to have this setup to start with when you start adding other obstacles and you get further into the obby, that it returns you to checkpoints and keeps track of everything for you. So I really hope that you enjoyed that, and I look forward to seeing you throughout the Obby series. I'm going to create lots of exciting things for you to use in your projects, and I look forward to seeing you there. If you found this video useful, subscribe now. For more information about my online courses, go to mrbrendanross.com.